Pretending to be a pig and eating a tiger, devoted to pursuing a career, straight woman times Meiqiang is a miserable and sunny boy with a dark belly, rebirth, revenge, Shuangwen, 1v1, strong and strong, playing the pig and eating the tiger. In his past life, General Yi was killed by his son. Law Xue Huaidan with great righteousness. With the downfall of the Yi mansion, Ye Zhaoyan fell into the mud with his mother and was imprisoned by his father Xue Huaidan in the Yi mansion where he had changed hands. It was not until the death of both mother and daughter that Ye Zhaoyan realized that all of this had long been predetermined, being rubbed and treated as a stepping ladder. Looking back 5 years ago, she saw through the illusion of filial piety and vowed to protect everything belonging to the Yi family. Along the way, there were many dangers, and a handsome young man was beside him, exhausted and worried. Are you sure you want to take action against that person? If you're afraid of being implicated, then draw a clear line with me. I am now requesting an imperial decree that will not come soon, so that we can share weal and woe together. Ye Zhaoyan sharpened his sword and said, Don't you want to follow in the footsteps of Xue Huaidan? Heaven and earth have a conscience, and all my possessions are with you. The young man almost burst into tears. Keywords of the novel. Bubu Xing Jiao no pop-ups, Bubu Xing Jiao TXT complete collection download, Bubu Xing Jiao latest chapter reading. Chapter 1. Rebirth. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 1 Rebirth. A hoarse and painful moan ran through the quiet and elegant attic, startling several sparrows in the courtyard. In the room, a woman with scars all over her body was being tightly grasped by 3 maids, fresh scars crisscrossing her face, slowly dripping with blood. Ye Zhaoyan's eyes turned red, and he couldn't help but twitch and struggle under the pain of the flesh in his heart. The middle-aged woman holding scissors made her final cut at the corner of her eye, with a fierce expression that was vastly different from the usual dignified demeanor of a noble lady. Yan Fengzi hates these eyes the most, just like that pretentious old slut. Xue Jiangui stood up on the recliner beside her and wiped her hands. Why bother with my mother herself? She doesn't mind getting her hands dirty, she said in Ye Zhaoyan's blurred vision. A pair of brocade shoes with broken flowers and jade walked forward. Xue Jiangui ran over Ye Zhaoyan's disabled knee with his foot, and his tone was extremely disgusted. It's also fortunate that my father cared about the past and still saved you a lowly life. You don't have to resent it. Ning Yuan's family will be executed, but only you and your mother can survive to this day. It's a gift. Xue Jianxian and Ye Zhaoyan are both daughters of Xue Huaidan. However, Xue Jianxian has been marked as an illegitimate daughter since birth and has been raised outside the mansion for more than 10 years without any visible light. Once jealous of his legitimate daughter for countless days and nights, Xue Jiangui is now stepping on her feet, feeling comfortable all over her body. Ye Zhaoyan was torn apart by pain and his consciousness was blurred. He had no time to pay attention to his eyes, but stubbornly looked inside through the curtain. A middle-aged man with a handsome face sat leaning against the inside of the curtain, watching coldly for a while. Ye Zhaoyan thought sarcastically that if it weren't for their 3-point similarity in appearance, it would be difficult to imagine that this person was her father with such a cold and indifferent expression. Enough Fengzi. Give her a good time, a tired voice came from within, as if accustomed to the scene before her. Yan Fengzi seemed unwilling to say, Master, it was she who caused our mother and daughter to remain anonymous for 10 years. I can't swallow this breath. Zhao Yan tugged at the corner of his mouth and sneered at the woman with luxurious makeup in front of him. How can a dark outer room not hide its name? She occupied the magpie's nest and took everything that didn't belong to her. Xue Huaidan closed his eyes slightly and said indifferently, What do you want to do? I will slowly torture her. Let her go to the underworld to accompany that old thing. Ye Zhaoyan opened his eyes, with a hint of resentment in them. They were so resentful of their deceased grandfather. This kind of person is not worthy of dying in Ningyuan Prefecture, Xue Huaidan said, picking up the medicine that had already cooled down on the table. flipping her head and personally pouring it down. A tingling sensation mixed with bitter medicine ran through her throat, and her teeth were covered in blood. She couldn't help but spit out a mouthful of bloody medicine. Ye Zhaoyan was in excruciating pain and fell to the ground. When this medicine was taken, the person's throat became sore, and then their internal organs slowly ulcerated and died. Ye Zhaoyan wanted to speak and let out a hoarse and incomplete voice. Xue Huaidan loosened her head like a piece of garbage and coldly ordered, "Throw her into the wilderness and find a better burial ground to bury her. Don't dirty my place." "Wait." Xue Fengzi quickly stopped, her eyes slightly turning, and she smiled coquettishly, "I'm afraid her body will rot in the wilderness and stain your eyes." Xue Huaidan swept over Ye Zhaoyan, who was all disheveled, with a cold and gloomy look in his eyes. After a while, he finally spoke in a cold tone and said, "Since you are so understanding, I'll leave it to you to handle." Xue Huaidan opened the door and a cold wind blew in, blowing on his cold and iron face. He turned his back and no longer cared about everything that happened behind him. "Unbind her." Yan Fengzi looked at Ye Zhaoyan with disgust, turned her head, and instructed the servants behind her. Ye Zhaoyan fell softly to the ground, his hair scattered and covering his dirty face, his body trembling with pain. Yan Fengzi waved his hand, and a servant took out a sharp dagger from his sleeve and placed it on Ye Zhaoyan's mouth. "Madam, what do you want to do?" Yan Fengzi smiled eerily and reached out to pat the servant's dagger, saying with hatred, "Peel off her clothes and humiliate her, let her taste all the pain." Two servants rushed forward and stripped Ye Zhaoyan, who was covered in blood, naked, and thrown him to the ground. A cold and bone-piercing humiliation hit Ye Zhaoyan, who knelt down with empty eyes. Ye Zhaoyan's limbs were rudely lifted by the servants, and sharp knives tormented her little by little. She was in excruciating pain, with veins bulging on her forehead, but she gritted her teeth without snorting. This humiliation was something she had never endured before. She remembered how those servants had also bullied her in Tengyuan at that time, and she even thought of committing suicide. Not enough. I want her to be in excruciating pain. Yan Fengzi laughed wildly, her stunning and charming face twisted and deformed due to anger. The servants inserted daggers into the woman's body, gradually breaking her meridians and gouging out her bones. Ye Zhaoyan felt as if his body had turned into a piece of scrap metal, with all his muscles and bones broken, and the pain was unbearable. As the servants became more and more reckless, her eyes became extremely desperate, filled with hatred and pain, like a blooming flower on the other side. In this sea of flowers, she only needed a gentle blow to transform into dust. Ye Zhaoyan closed his eyes and gradually fell into darkness. Zhao Er. A teardrop slid down her eyelashes, falling into her temples and disappearing. Ye Zhaoyan suddenly opened his eyes, and his eyes were pitch black. Isn't she dead? Why is she here? Is it a dream? A chill hit her, and she couldn't help but hold on to herself. Only then did she realize that her once shabby clothes had turned into silk and satin. Upon closer inspection, she was adorned with a magnificent red dress embroidered with golden bird patterns, a belt adorned with rosewood inlaid with pearls tied around her waist, and a purple jade pendant hanging around her neck. She exuded a noble and elegant demeanor. I'm not dead. Ye Zhaoyan muttered to himself incredulously. But when I fell ill, I couldn't help but speak in a daze. A kind sigh came in my ear. The voice was so familiar. Ye Zhaoyan turned his head and saw a woman holding a cloak to cover her, with a faint smile on her face. The woman in front of her was covered in green hair and cloud hair, with a face like hibiscus, beautiful eyes like the moon, red lips and white teeth, and a graceful figure. She was Ye Zhaoyan's mother, Ye Fugui. Behind Yi stood two young men, about 16 or 17 years old. One of them is tall and handsome, and it is Ye Zhaoqin, the cousin of Ye Zhaoyan. The other one is slim and quite handsome, but it is her cousin Ye Zhaohua. Mother, you're not dead. Ye Zhaoyan looked at his mother and tears couldn't help but fall. I thought I would never see you again in this life. Silly child, how can you speak so crazily? Mother is almost scared by you. Ye Fugui gently patted her back, her soft voice seeming to heal her pain. I'm by your side every day, why can't you see me? Yes, I just had a nightmare. Ye Zhaoyan choked up and nodded, temporarily burying the nightmare like past life in his heart. End of this chapter. Chapter 2. Nightmares. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 2 Nightmares, Don't Cry Now. Yi raised her hand to help wipe away the tears from Ye Zhaoyan's cheeks. Such a big person, crying whenever they say, really worries my mother. Ye Zhaoyan looked at the beautiful woman in front of him, unable to imagine that she would eventually become an old woman from a previous life. Yi Fugui from Yi Mansion has always been the leader of prestigious women. Yi was born into a wealthy family in Jindu, and his ancestors were founding heroes. His father, Yi Wenshuan, was appointed as the top scorer in martial arts, and his grandfather was the most prestigious commander under the former emperor. The sons of the Yi family are all outstanding and have a wide influence in the court. Yi Shi, as the only daughter of General Yi, was highly favored and admired by the wealthy women in the capital since childhood. 2 years after Yi Fugui and Ji, he was reluctant to part ways because of General Ye's love, and recruited Xue Huaidan, the former top scorer in the new imperial examination, to join the Yi family. Even the daughter born to Yi Fugui was given the surname Yi, taking the prestigious male character Zhao generation, and was carefully raised from a young age, learning martial arts skills. After the joy of surviving the disaster, Ye Zhaoyan remembered the tragedy of his past life. She has been reborn, and the haze has not gone far. If the venomous snake that lurks in the dark cannot be removed, the Yi family will repeat the mistakes of their past lives. Thinking of this, she looked at Yi Shi seriously and said, Mother, is Sister Yan still in the suburbs? Yan Mimi was the illegitimate daughter of Xue Yinxian and Yan Fengzi in their previous life, who later became Xue Jiangui. She was invited to the Yi family in the name of her niece, and her mother Yan Fengzi pretended to be friendly with the Yi family, but later, there were various bizarre changes. The scene of his past life surged like a tide, and Zhao Yan's eyes slowly turned red. The long eyelashes covered the towering hatred in his clear eyes. She will never let those dirty things from her past life happen again. Yi Shi was unaware of the changes in her mood at the moment. Seeing her daughter drooping her head without saying a word, she thought she was too frightened and comforted. Zhao, you should first cultivate your body. We will discuss these matters later. The whereabouts of Yan's niece are not of concern to Yi. Thinking of this little girl who met once, for some reason, she always had a strange feeling, unable to express her likes and dislikes. Zhao Yan nodded slightly and said, Everything is up to my mother. At this time, a servant girl came in with a tray on which was a bowl of snow fungus soup and some cakes. Eldest lady, you just woke up and need to eat something to replenish your strength. The master ordered the kitchen to cook this snow fungus soup. The master also ordered the servant to prepare several sets of clothes for you to change and wash. You should drink it while it is hot. The servant left. Your father always cares about you. Ye's face relaxed a lot, put the tray on the table, took out a few small dishes, put them aside, and then picked up snow fungus soup to try the temperature. With her movements, a familiar strong fragrance wafted out, which once made Ye Zhaoyan sweat profusely in his midnight dreams. Don't drink. Ye Zhaoyan leaned out half of his body, swept down the dishes, and fell out of the bed. Seeing this, Ye Zhaohua leaned over to help Ye Zhaoyan. Suddenly, a strong force brushed against her, and a tall figure rushed forward faster and steadily caught her. The crystal-clear white jade bowl fell off, spilling most of the soup and resting on the thick carpet on the foot, surprisingly intact. Ye Zhaoyan only felt that it landed on a hard chest, and the tip of his nose was filled with a somewhat heavy incense, the fragrance of phoenix myrrh, the most revered and noble fragrance among the upper-class women in the capital. Raising his eyes, he saw the young man's beautiful jaw, and the other person's phoenix eyes, which were looking at her with concern, gazed at her. "Are you okay?" The smell made her feel suffocated. She quickly coughed, and unconsciously withdrew to return to her mother's side. Ye Zhaoyan looked at his daughter, who was still in shock, stroked her forehead, and said with a slight shock, "What's wrong with this?" Ye Zhaoyan recalled the situation just now, and his mind was spinning. It seemed that Ye Zhaoyan had started moving at the moment she called out. In the moment she pounced, her face couldn't distinguish whether she was nervous or frightened. After careful consideration of her wording, she slowly spoke up, "Mother, this soup doesn't seem to taste right. It may be overnight. This soup is a medicine that causes people to fall into nightmares and gradually hallucinate after long-term use, and it is also the culprit that caused her to miss several opportunities in her past life." At this point, she had no intention of speaking up. Even if the conspiracy of this soup is exposed today, Xue Huaidan will only plot against their mother and daughter from elsewhere. Moreover, in his past life, Ye Zhaoyan had always trusted his father, and he did not have a delicate heart that had been exposed to all kinds of hidden schemes. Hearing the words, Ye Zhaoyan looked down at the snow fungus soup in the porcelain bowl, frowned slightly, and said to Xian beside him, "Go and invite Meiqiang." Meiqiang is a famous cook specially invited by Xue Huaidan from Jiangnan. She usually makes exquisite dishes in various ways for the Yi family and daughter to enjoy. Seeing this, Ye Zhaoyan's face slightly changed and he looked at Ye Zhaoyan. "Let me taste it." Before he could finish speaking, Ye Zhaoyan had already taken the lead in picking up the porcelain bowl, scooping up the soup and gently sniffing it on his lips. He frowned, his expression somewhat confused. "Chinner, what's wrong? Is there something wrong?" Ye Zhaoyan looked at him and her heart tightened. Ye Zhaoyan is a named disciple of the Hengyang Medicinal Temple, who is somewhat proficient in pharmacology. If he has any questions, he will never leave. This bowl of snow fungus soup is effective. Ye Zhaoyan stretched his face. "This is a tonic diet." At this time, a slim woman stumbled in, bowed her head and flopped down on her knees. Madame atones for her sins, because the maidservant sees that the young lady always has nightmares and is worried, so she decided to make this tonic diet on her own, hoping that the young lady can rest at ease. Ye Zhaoyan was surprised. If she had said earlier that the soup was poisonous, now Meiqiang would be replacing the dead ghost. Surprisingly, the worst-case scenario was anticipated in advance, indicating the depth of the scheming behind it. The servant is guilty. Meiqiang was even more frightened when she saw no one responding. She began to kowtow incessantly, and a crisp sound kept coming along with her movements. Ye's heart was full of mixed feelings, and he was upset and said, "Stop. If this tonic diet is really okay, I will ask the doctor to have a stool test." Before she could finish her sentence, Meiqiang had already picked up the remaining soup and drank it with her head up. She spoke urgently, "Absolutely not. I will drink 10 more bowls and nothing will happen. Please rest assured, madam." Ye Zhaoyan looked at the white jade bowl, and surprisingly, it was as clean as new, with no drop left. "Mother, my cousin said it was tonic diet, which must be good for your health." Seeing her speak, Ye Zhaoyan suppressed her doubts and forced her head to nod, saying, "Meiqiang will be fined 1 year's salary. You cannot touch the young lady's food again. You can go back to the master's side to serve her in the future." Yi Fugui's mind is not deep, and he has always been kind to people. Just because this matter concerns her daughter's safety, she has to be cautious. After all, Meiqiang is also Xue Huaidan's person. Ye Zhaoyan treated him with great respect, being gentle and courteous outside. Even in ordinary matters, she never overstepped her authority. Even Xue Huaidan is proud of his wife's obedience and understanding, and no one is likely to know the subtleties involved. She turned around and saw her daughter's face was pale, a little distressed. "Zhao, are you hungry?" She picked up Xian's fresh congee, handed it to Zhaoyan, and gently fed her. Seeing that she had a good appetite, Yi smiled and said, "In half a month, your father will take you to Tangyuan for summer vacation. Is it already summer? Ye Zhaoyan's smile stiffened on his face. She lived aimlessly for 3 years before her death, tormented to the point where she almost forgot the time. Tangyuan is the beginning of a nightmare in a past life. End of this chapter. Chapter 3. Assistance. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 3. Assistance. In the past life, the once beautiful and peaceful Tang garden has become a cage filled with shame. Even if Ye Zhaoyan opened her eyes, her mother's tearful expression from the corner of her eye instantly appeared before her. Her desperate and empty eyes were terrifying, and the heart-wrenching pain that she would never forget. By mid-month, it will be midsummer. The Tang garden is filled with flowers and plants, as well as lotus ponds and ponds. Inside, there is also your favorite swing. You have always been afraid of the heat, so you use it to escape the heat. Shower. What's wrong with you? Ye Zhaoyan originally said with a happy smile on her face, but inadvertently lowered her head to find that her daughter was already covered in tears, which surprised and hurt her. Zhao just couldn't bear to leave her mother. Ye Zhaoyan lowered his head and withdrew the heavy weight from his eyes. Upon hearing her daughter's words, Ye felt even more heartbroken. She reached out and gently stroked her hair, comforting her, saying, "Silly child, my mother has always been by your side. It's really not possible. My mother will accompany you to Tangyuan to escape the summer heat." Mother. Ye Zhaoyan looked up and suppressed the deep pain, pretending to be carefree and coquettish. Zhao just wants her mother to be with her in Ye's mansion. Now that my grandfather is in Bianxi, it's cold here. Shall we wait for him to come back at home? Seeing her daughter's smile, he said with a heartache, "I promised your father to let you go to Tangyuan for summer vacation in the middle of the month, but he went to great lengths to take care of it for you." Ye Zhaoyan remained silent and gently caressed his mother's gentle face. She could never let her mother stay away from the protection of the Yi family's influence. Looking at the sparkling tears in Ye Zhaoyan's eyes, Yi hugged her tightly with heartache and whispered, "Anyway, since that's the case, Zhao should stay with her mother at the Yi mansion." Ye Zhaoyan quickly nodded and buried his head in his mother's arms. Seeing his daughter's complexion visibly improving, Yi Fugue took the black green under his eyes and finally went back to rest. The Yi family held a banquet to celebrate Ye Zhaoyan's recovery from illness. Before the sun set, the maid Inger entered the door to dress and groom Ye Zhaoyan. Ye Zhaoyan glanced at the clothes in the dowry box and selected a Xue embroidery moonlit pleated satin skirt. That's the birthday gift Xue Huaidan gave her. Ye Zhaoyan didn't pay much attention to these things in her past life, but now she has more important intentions. "Inger, help me roll up my hair." Yes, Inger picked up the wooden hairpin and quickly twisted out a double flat bun. The person in the mirror has a skin like condensed fat, eyebrows like willow branches, eyes flowing, and red lips slightly curled up. Ye Zhaoyan had already become such a beautiful color without applying any makeup, but unfortunately, in the past, she wore plain clothes and simple hairpins, and was accustomed to wearing them in military academies, which may have left her pearls and jade shrouded in dust. Inger was about to change her clothes when she suddenly heard a noisy noise outside the courtyard. "Sister, don't be in such a hurry. What should I do if I collide with her?" a calm and introverted voice worried. "I clearly heard that she is getting sick quickly the day before yesterday," a somewhat unrestrained voice laughed as the volume gradually decreased. Ye Zhaoyan asked Inger to lift the door curtain, and saw 2 young and beautiful girls in the courtyard, both dressed beautifully and exquisitely. One of the women was wearing a goose-yellow brocade jacket, with a light blue gauze skirt underneath. She was waist-length, and her smooth black hair was draped over her shoulders, appearing noble and dignified. This woman is none other than Xue Huaidan, the true cousin of the Xue family, and also the most outstanding girl of the Xue family. And another woman wearing a bright red gauze skirt, with a beautiful face, a delicate figure, and an arrogant temperament, is undoubtedly Xue Yuling. The 2 of them were turbulent in their childhood. After Xue Huaidan became a concubine, they both rose to heaven and lived a proud life. Under Xue Huaidan's guidance, they were carefully cultivated and both were extremely intelligent people. Not only is she proficient in every aspect of music, chess, calligraphy, and painting, but she also enjoys the love of the old lady. Especially Xue Zhaoyan, whose piano skills are comparable to those of palace musicians, has been praised by the old lady. The two people in the yard were maliciously speculating about the daughter lying on the bed. On weekdays, they were dressed in extremely gorgeous attire, and next to Ye Zhaoyan, they looked stunning. What trendy good things, even if rewarded to Ye Zhaoyan, will eventually be accidentally borrowed by her too. Previously, it was heard that Ye Zhaoyan was seriously ill and did not wake up. Xue Huaidan had already put on the demeanor of a young lady from the Ye family in front of the servants. If Ye Zhaoyan could not do it, she would naturally have to compete for this unique position. Now that Ye Zhaoyan wakes up, she cannot help feeling unwilling. The title of the only young lady in the Ye family is more luxurious than any jewelry. Ye Zhaoyan lowered her eyes and remained silent. In her past life, she had a simple mind and focused solely on military tactics and martial arts, never paying attention to these small matters. Until the fall of Ye Mansion, she and her mother were imprisoned. Xue's sisters smashed her kneecap in order to please Xue Jian. Just as the two were still unsatisfied, they saw a simple and elegant figure approaching one after another. I haven't seen you for a long time, and the two sisters are even more moving. Ye Zhaoyan smiled as she approached, just as she received the two sisters tenderly in a previous life. After seeing Ye Zhaoyan clearly, Xue Huaidan's eyes lit up and she immediately smiled, but a hint of disgust flashed in her eyes, just fleeting. Xue Zhaoyan was not surprised to see Ye Zhaoyan's good complexion, not as sickly as rumored, and his appearance was very appropriate. Today's dinner was specially prepared for Zhaoyan's younger sister. How could she dress so plainly? Xue Huaidan's face was concerned, but her eyes were filled with a smirk of schadenfreude. Zhaoyan has an ordinary appearance, but what's the difference between dressing up and not dressing up? Ye Zhaoyan said softly. He, what nonsense is that, younger sister? Xue Huaidan's eyes turned and she covered her mouth with a light smile. If younger sister doesn't mind, I'll pick out the clothes for you. Without waiting for Ye Zhaoyan to answer, she affectionately dragged her hand into the room and pounced on the dressing table filled with makeup boxes. Xue Zhaoyan walked in and saw the Su Xiu Yuehua pleated satin skirt on the shelf, slowing down in surprise. As usual, this kind of gorgeous dress, Ye Zhaoyan, is at the bottom of the box. Her attire is certainly gorgeous, but how can it compare to this dress? If Ye Zhaoyan wears this dress tonight. Xue Zhaoyan's calm on her face is a bit unsustainable. Ye Zhaoyan used to dislike dressing up, but her dressing table still had 9 makeup boxes, big and small. Xue Huaidan couldn't help but glance at these exquisite and valuable jewelry. Xue Zhaoyan, who boasted of her aloofness, couldn't help but take a glance. If these things could be used by her, she would surely dominate the grand banquets of all sizes in Jindu, but unfortunately, they were taken up for nothing by this ignorant layman. Xue Huaidan selected jade golden steps, pearl tendrils hairpin, inlaid pearl gold earrings, and glass pearl jade bracelet, and combed Ye Zhaoyan's hair back into a bun, wearing the pearl hairpin thoughtfully. Inger hesitated to speak on the side, while Xue Huaidan was clearly wearing a Chao Yun Jin Xiang bun, paired with these thick and antique jewelry, resembling the attire of a married woman, rather than a young girl who had not yet reached her hairpin. These pieces of jewelry look shiny with gold, but they are made of the most ordinary gold, silver, and less precious jewelry, with a touch of crude craftsmanship. For a noble woman like Ye Zhaoyan, it may seem too mediocre. End of this chapter. Chapter 4. Family Banquet. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 4 Family Banquet. Zhaoyan's younger sister is really beautiful. No wonder she doesn't like to dress up on a regular basis. She's amazing if she doesn't know how to do it, Xue Huaidan praised softly, even her voice became sweet. Ye Zhaoyan pretended not to understand the strong irony in her tone and earnestly said, "The jewelry my sister has chosen is good, but she is not suitable to wear them. It is someone like my sister who is suitable for such beautiful jewelry." Where did my sister say? Xue Yuling felt a bit embarrassed, unable to distinguish whether Ye Zhaoyan was serious or deliberately mocking. In her impression, Ye Zhaoyan was naive, foolish, and extremely foolish. "This hairpin looks quite unique," Xue Zhiyan suddenly spoke out. "Although the style is not trendy, it still has a bit of interest." As he spoke, he casually picked up a Tianbao Pawnee hairpin and put it on Xue Yuling's head. Ye Zhaoyan's eyelashes trembled and he smiled silently. "This hairpin looks ordinary, and the materials used are very precious. The entire Jindu is only 2, and the other one is with the Lord of Rong'an County." Xue Yuling had long known the name of this hairpin, but was struggling to find an excuse to borrow it. She naturally knew that the most luxurious Sunday wear in Rong'an County today has such a unique and unparalleled hairpin. "It's really good, but it's too shabby to be paired with Zhao Yan's younger sister," Xue Yuling responded, feeling anxious. On weekdays, they would try something out, but Ye Zhaoyan would ask them without them having to speak up, and then they would borrow it from them under the guise of attending a banquet. Today is really abnormal. Just as she was wearing a hairpin that was about to turn into a hot potato, Ye Zhaoyan turned his head and smiled, "Sister, it's so appropriate to wear it. Can you lend me your love for a few days? No need to be polite between sisters." Seeing Ye Zhaoyan's unpredictable tone, both of them breathed a sigh of relief. Xue Zhiyan took the opportunity to choose a gold mud rui cloud patterned skirt for Ye Zhaoyan, and her tone was rare to please, saying, "My younger sister is full of precious pearls and jade, but the Su embroidery moonflower pleated satin skirt is not very suitable. This skirt is unparalleled in beauty and best fits my younger sister's temperament. Sister has a very good eye. Could you please trouble the 2 sisters for me?" Ye Zhaoyan replied with a smile. "You and my sisters are dependent on each other. It is proper to help each other." Yinger, who was squeezed to the side, turned her mouth down in grievance. With such patterns and fabrics, coupled with the jewelry on the young lady's body, she was like a vulgar bride. But she knew very well about the arrogant and cautious past of these 2 people, and dared only complain in her heart, secretly cursing these 2 aunties is really disgusting. Xue Yuling was secretly happy when she saw this. It seemed that Ye Zhaoyan did not realize that the dress was inappropriate. She couldn't help but add insult to injury and said, "Sister Zhaoyan's outfit is really outstanding, it has made us all look pale." Xue Zhiyan couldn't help but laugh when she saw Xue Yuling's exaggerated expression and said, "Sister, I also had no choice but to make things worse." Ye Zhaoyan smiled silently as he watched the 2 of them play. Xue Yuling said again, "Sister, this Su Xiu Yuehua pleated satin skirt is not suitable for Sister Zhaoyan, but it is in line with Sister Zhiyan's style." Ye Zhaoyan watched them sing and harmonize, feeling a bit bored. "Sister Zhiyan, please try on this dress for me." Xue Zhiyan hesitated for a moment. Is this asking her to borrow and leave? She did indeed have some envy for Ye Zhaoyan's clothing, not only because the fabric and style of the clothes she wore were something she had never seen before, but also because the clothes were originally made by her uncle Xue Huaidan according to her size. Although Ye Zhaoyan is 1 year younger than her, she is equally tall and outstanding. When Xue Huaidan ordered Xiu Nyang to rush to make this garment, Ye Zhaoyan was not in Jindu, it was Xue Zhiyan who measured it for her. "Sister, it's difficult for Zhaoyan's sister to accept her love, so please accept it." Xue Yuling immediately dissuaded Xue Zhiyan when she saw her hesitation. Xue Zhiyan gritted her teeth and finally nodded. Ye Zhaoyan has not yet finished dressing up here, and the front hall is already bustling due to the dinner party. Xue's sisters are used to being in the limelight, so they found an excuse to leave Ye Zhaoyan. Xue Huaidan sat at the top with Yi Fugue and Mrs. Xue, while on their left were Xue Zhiyan, Xue Yuling, and Mrs. Qin, and on their right were Ye Zhaochen and Ye Zhaoyu. Xue Huaidan was chatting and laughing with her head held high, proud of the praise she received for the hairpin on her head. Tonight, the two most outstanding cousins of the Ye family are present, and she needs to perform even better. When she thought of Ye Zhaoyan's rustic attire, the smile on her lips became even stronger. Someone shouted, "Miss is here," and the slightly lively main hall fell silent for an instant. Everyone looked towards the door and saw a girl with a peach and plum-like face walking slowly. Her long black hair was tied up high with a red jade crown, revealing her slender and fair neck. Ye Zhaoyan wore a blue long skirt with a light purple belt tied around her waist, appearing exquisite and elegant. The hem of the skirt is embroidered with intricate patterns, swaying in the wind and shimmering under the candlelight. Xue Huaidan saw Ye Zhaoyan at a glance, her gaze full of disbelief. The others also looked over one after another. Ye Zhaoyan saw Ye Zhaoyan with a stunning expression in his eyes. Such an appearance, surprisingly, bears a striking resemblance to Xue Huaidan, while also carrying her own unique charm and charm. When Xue Huaidan saw Ye Zhaoyan's outfit, her face immediately darkened, and there was a feeling of her throat being choked, making it difficult for her to breathe smoothly. She never expected that Ye Zhaoyan, who always wore military uniform in her impression, would wear such a feminine dress, and that face had turned into a makeup similar to hers, but even more stunning than her. There was a hint of shock in the eyes of the others. Only Xue Huaidan, the father, had a deep and unpredictable gaze, not knowing what he was thinking. Ye Zhaoyan stood still, saluted with a graceful and generous posture. Although she doesn't like wearing these jewelry, this kind of attire fits her very well. Father, mother, grandmother, all cousins. Zhaoyan is late, please forgive me. Ye Fugue quickly lifted Ye Zhaoyan up and praised him with satisfaction, saying, "My Zhao has grown up. Zhaoyan has just recovered from his serious illness, so it's understandable that he came late." "Take his seat," Xue Huaidan said in a cheerful tone, as if the person with a dull and unclear face just now was not him. "Zhaoyan, thank you very much for your father's concern," Ye Zhaoyan said. Madame Xue nodded in satisfaction when she saw Ye Zhaoyan dressed neatly and with a carefully dressed appearance. She is a person who loves face very much and likes to dress up beautifully and exquisitely. "Zhaoyan is very beautiful today," Ye Zhaoyan said sincerely. Xue Huaidan's eyes flickered with disappointment upon hearing these words. She has always been the most outstanding girl in the Xue family, especially in the Ye family. If it weren't for Ye Zhaoyan's prestigious reputation in the past, outsiders would be most praised for her name Xue Huaidan when mentioning the Ye family. Ye Zhaoyan looked at Xue Huaidan, who lowered her head and forced a smile, with a gentle smile on her face and said, "Thank you, cousin." End of this chapter. Chapter 5. Concerns. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The source has no content or has errors. Chapter 6. Lost and Found. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 6. Lost and Found. Ye Zhaoyan played a trick and asked Inger to set up a thick curtain, using her hands to have Dr. Zhang check her pulse. She didn't expect to ask the doctor so soon. It was Dr. Zhang from outside the mansion. In her past life, Dr. Zhang rarely appeared, and she was unsure if this person had any connection with Xue Huaidan. In the past 2 days, in order to have the energy to deal with the difficulties in front of her, she has not touched anything from Xue Huaidan again. The food was quietly disposed of by her. But every time Air brings medicine and food, she has to take a sip. In order not to startle the snake, Ye Zhaoyan did not refuse to bring the soup in, and Yinger, who was responsible for the handover, naturally had to inspect and try it in person. These small doses are not enough to make Yinger's body feel unwell, and she can doze off for at most half an hour in the afternoon. Air, who takes a small dose of medicine, happens to be the best person to handle pulse monitoring. Ye Fugue was originally worried, but he breathed a sigh of relief when he saw that Dr. Zhang had come out and said he was okay. "In the future, you can't be careless about what you enter," she said anxiously. The situation at tonight's banquet made her feel anxious. Unfortunately, Ye Zhaoyan appeared to guarantee that this matter was unimpeded, making her somewhat uncertain about her conjecture. After pondering for a moment, she turned to Xian beside her and ordered, "Take Mrs. Personal Maid and teach her well." Ye Zhaoyan looked at his mother's busy schedule, both sad and happy, and let her take care of it. Late at night, Ye Fugui finally followed Ye Zhaoyan's instructions and left the door. Ye Fugui left, and Ye Zhaoyan began to contemplate everything for tonight. She turned her head to look at the bottle of Kongtai wine and the neatly arranged blue jade cups and plates beside her, lost in thought. I'm afraid Xue Huaidan is already dissatisfied with her secret resistance. Once upon a time, her daughter was too obedient and could be firmly controlled without much effort from him. It's natural to rely on that one without any defense. After more than a decade of peace and security, who would have thought that his biological father would take action against his wife and daughter? Thinking of this, Ye Zhaoyan's expression became solemn. Sooner or later, there will always be a sharp confrontation, and it is inevitable for father-daughter to tear apart their faces. She needs to prepare early for that matter. At midnight, Ye Fugui and his two maids entered Xue Huaidan's study. Candlelight was shining brightly in the study, and behind the desk, Xue Huaidan sat upright, looking down at the documents in his hand with a hint of coldness on his face. Madame Qin stood in front of the paperwork with a box of dim sum and whispered, "Dan Er, listen to your aunt and use some food." Seeing Ye Fugui coming, Xue Huaidan lifted his head and asked, "Madam, why did you come?" "Fugui, please advise Dan Er quickly. He doesn't want to eat or drink for the sake of Zhaoyan's matter," Mrs. Qin hurriedly said. "I came precisely for today's matter." The expression on Ye Fugui's face was sad and somewhat aggrieved. The maid behind her was dressed in blue floral cloth, dressed in ordinary attire, not the usual few big maids. Both maids looked heavy, as if they were holding back something to say. Xue Huaidan said bluntly, "But have you checked the soup of Zhaoyan today?" "Master, I have already checked it," a maid respectfully replied. "Is there anything wrong with it, master?" "There's nothing wrong with it," replied the maid. "It's just that." Xue Huaidan's face darkened upon hearing this, and a deeper black color brewed in his eyes. "Just what?" Mrs. Qin frowned and asked, as if afraid that the maid might slip her tongue. However, the servant girl hesitated and hesitated to speak. Seeing this, Ye Fugui felt a bit anxious in his heart, complaining that the girl in the kitchen was so afraid of things. At this moment, Xue Huaidan slowly spoke with a cold tone, "If you have something to say, don't cover it up." "Yes, sir." The maids discovered that the set of cups used by the young lady, along with the Kongtai liquor, had disappeared after the banquet. The other maid couldn't help but reveal her discovery at the time. "Bastard!" Xue Huaidan was furious when he heard this and slapped the desk heavily, causing the rice paper on the desk to fall to the ground. "The matter has not been investigated yet, how dare you lose the evidence? Master, spare your life. Master, spare your life." The two maids quickly knelt on the ground, begging for mercy. They were just acting on orders. Originally busy in the kitchen, they went to help tidy up the dishes after the dinner without any delay. Who knew something like Mrs. happened? It was already late at night, and the lady instructed the butler to thoroughly investigate the items used tonight. Who would have thought that they found out they were missing a set of cups and plates? It was the set that the young lady used to drink Kongtai wine that night. If this matter were to be spread, what would be the face of the Yi family? Xue Huaidan asked indignantly, with a threatening tone in his tone. If physical evidence falls into the hands of others, it is an infinite hidden danger, and it is difficult to guarantee that some clues will not be discovered one day. Even though he tried to keep his hands clean, many things were done under the guise of Madame Xue, and he never personally touched them. There is no leaky wall in the world. "Master, calm down. Master, calm down." The two maids kowtowed and begged for mercy. "Someone. Give me 20 whips, lock me in the darkroom, no one is allowed to visit." Xue Huaidan shouted sternly. Yes. The guard at the door of the study responded and rushed into the room, pulling the two maids out. The two maids struggled desperately and cried, "Master, no, no, please be lenient. Please spare the maids." The crying and commotion of the two maids gradually drowned out in the sound of whipping. 20 whips, good luck and half a life. However, Lady Qin knew very well that Xue Huaidan in front of her clearly wanted to kill him, and the 20 lashes of the guards could not easily make the two maids survive. She couldn't help feeling a chill in her spine and stepped forward to comfort her, saying, "Danner, calm down and don't get angry. You can't blame the two girls for this." Xue Huaidan glared angrily at her, his gaze like an arrow, as if he wanted to expose Lady Qin. Madame Qin trembled with fear and moved her body backwards to avoid his gaze. Ye Fugue could only see Xue Huaidan's back and was unaware of his terrifying expression at the moment. She rarely saw Xue Huaidan lose his composure, and her grievances dissipated with Xue Huaidan's anger. He still cares about his daughter, but... Ye Fugue suppressed the strange feeling in his heart. But I saw that Xue Huaidan had already sorted out his emotions and regained his usual gentleness. "Madam, if these two maids dare to neglect, they must be prepared to bear the punishment. I don't want such a thing to happen again," he said, looking at Ye Fugue standing by with a strong sense of concern in his eyes. "My husband is also trying to show his words." Ye Fugue forced a smile and hadn't recovered from the scene just now. Recently, there have been frequent strange incidents in the mansion, which have also affected Zhaoyan. I think it's better to have Lady Qin take Zhaoyan to the hidden temple to pray for blessings. His tone was plain, but it revealed an invincible dignity. Madame Qin, who was standing beside her, felt a chill in her spine and quickly responded, "I also had this intention a long time ago. Zhaoyan fell seriously ill a few days ago and should seek the blessings of Bodhisattva. Madame Qin is indeed somewhat famous in Buddhism. When I was still a woman for the first time, it was because of a set of prayer rituals that I was seen by the old lady in the palace and given a jade rui. From then on, Lady Qin became infatuated with worshipping the Buddha and became known." "Okay, that's good." Thinking of Mrs. Qin's daily devout worship, Ye Fugue nodded. "Mrs. Lao Qin is here now. Taking Zhaoyan to the hidden temple to seek peace can also be considered as a way to relieve Zhaoyan's worries." Madame Qin responded in a chorus, okay, this is Zhaoyan's blessing." Unconsciously, her palms were covered in a thin layer of sweat. End of this chapter. Chapter 7. Travel. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 7 Travel. It was soon an auspicious day for praying for blessings. Ye Fugue accompanied his daughter to the front yard early in the morning, with a warm smile on his face. Ye Zhaoyan carefully rested for a few days and looked extremely well. "Zhao, your father has been very concerned about your affairs. He has been investigating everywhere these past 2 days, day and night, and almost exhausted his body." Ye Fugue spoke with a hint of heartache in his words. Only she knew that this bit of heartache was mostly for her daughter. Upon hearing this, Ye Zhaoyan felt amused. He was afraid that the wine and cup had been lost, which made Xue Huaidan anxious and eager to dig 3 feet into the ground. He never imagined that it would be Ye Zhaoyan himself who would take things along. That soft sedan made her twice as efficient as dozing off and giving her a pillow. "Zhaoyan will remind father to rest more," she obediently replied. Even before Xue Huaidan became suspicious, Ye Zhaoyan had already handled this great gift properly. The two walked to the front yard and saw someone waiting there. Xue Huaidan was dressed in black clothes and riding clothes, with a gold chain and a sword around his waist, and a dusty appearance. Madame Qin changed into a silk robe embroidered with bamboo forest patterns, wearing a flying fairy bun and a cloak. Ye Fu gathered his daughter's collar and reminded her to be careful all the way. The ear door opened and Ye Zhaoyan walked out, dressed in a plain white gauze skirt and wearing a pearl hairpin. Her appearance was beautiful and elegant, like a green lotus that emerged from the mud without staining. Ye Zhaoyan nodded slightly and said with a smile, "Father, Mrs. Qin. She carries a refined charm, which is completely opposite to the vulgar powder aroma on her daughter's body. This kind of her slightly calmed Xue Huaidan's anger in his heart. That innocent aura doesn't seem like a cunning person who is well versed in strategy. Perhaps the previous speculation was that he was too suspicious." His face softened a bit and he said, "Zhaoyan, my father is escorting you and Lady Qin to the hidden temple today. Father works hard day after day, so tired that my daughter can't bear it." Ye Zhaoyan was slightly surprised and didn't know what Xue Huaidan was up to. At this moment, Xue Zhiyan, who had just arrived at the mansion gate, also heard Xue Huaidan's words and paused in her footsteps. She knew that Lady Qin was going to bring Ye Zhaoyan to pray for blessings, and she was already a bit unhappy. In the past few years, Ye Zhaoyan and General Yi have been away for years, and even when they return to their residence, they rarely go out. Most of the occasions when these female relatives go out are attended by her and Xue Yuling. She and the others are accustomed to treating themselves as Miss Yi from the Yi family when they are away, and have received countless preferential treatment, which is quite respectable. Now that Ye Zhaoyan is going out, this privilege may not be as good as before. Fortunately, the temple where this prayer was made was a remote and not very famous temple. Even if Ye Zhaoyan went, it would not affect her. It is unknown whether Ye Zhaoyan personally went out by chance or had other plans. It was precisely because of this relationship that she got up early to inquire about the situation. "I didn't expect the old master to personally escort me." This made her somewhat suspicious. Is it Ye Zhaoyan who is causing trouble in it, trying to regain the glory lost in these years? Upon this thought, jealousy surged up in her heart, causing her to clench her fists and impale her nails in the palm, causing some pain and awakening. Miss Yi, who has been working hard for several years, has a reputation. Now that someone is picking peaches, how can she hold her breath? She took a deep breath, squeezed out a smile, and softly called out, "Uncle." Upon hearing his niece's coquettish voice, Xue Huaidan turned his head and saw Xue Zhiyan, frowning. He has always had a kind attitude towards the daughter of the Xue family, let alone such a standout Xue Zhiyan. In his eyes, Xue Zhiyan has a special significance. However, he still has something more important to attend to today, and Xue Zhiyan's appearance is somewhat eye-catching at this moment. You're here too." Xue Huaidan nodded, still trying to save face for Xue Zhiyan. Xue Zhiyan was secretly pleased in her heart, but her face remained expressionless. She only responded weakly, "Yes, Yenna heard that her uncle is going out, so she came specifically to see him off and also visit Sister Zhaoyan." Upon hearing these words, Ye Zhaoyan couldn't help but sneer in his heart. Xue Zhiyan was dressed in a lake blue flower washing brocade shirt, which complemented her delicate melon seed face and fair water spirit. Obviously, it has been carefully dressed up. Xue Zhiyan couldn't help feeling a bit embarrassed when she saw everyone speechless. "Uncle, Zhiyan wants to follow Zhaoyan's sister to the temple to seek blessings and pray for her," she continued in a soft voice. Madame Qin was somewhat surprised to see this. The temple she went to today was just a small temple with little reputation, and it could even attract Miss Xue's attention. "I never saw her so concerned about worshipping Buddha in the past." Xue Huaidan frowned and was about to refuse when he heard Ye Zhaoyan's gentle voice say, "Since Sister Zhiyan is willing to contribute, then Zhaoyan will thank you first." After speaking, she also gave Xue Zhiyan a grateful smile. Seeing this smile, Xue Zhiyan was surprised and said strangely, "Sisters should help each other." Regardless of whether Ye Zhaoyan truly appreciates her or not, at least her goal has been achieved. Xue Huaidan frowned, which was somewhat different from his original plan. He pondered for a moment and said, "Since that's the case, Mrs. Qin can take them with her. There's always some care for the two girls when they're together, and I can rest assured." The carriage quickly drove out of Yi Mansion and entered the bustling market. Xue Huaidan led a team of people and horses, riding horses from a distance behind. Ye Zhaoyan gently lifted the sedan curtain and looked out, only to see people coming and going on the street, bustling with activity. The shops on the street are decorated with various lanterns, creating a bustling scene. She secretly sighed in her heart that after 3 years without seeing the sun, she had forgotten how bustling the capital was. The carriage in Ye's mansion was spacious and comfortable, and Ye Zhaoyan leaned against the cushion and began to close his eyes and take a nap. Pulling Xue Huaidan as a cushion, she finally managed to catch a breath. Besides, she has other backers. Xue Huaidan sat on the other side of Ye Zhaoyan, occasionally looking at her. Ye Zhaoyan didn't want to talk to her until another line of sight turned towards her. She opened her eyes and saw Lady Qin's eyes fixed on her cheeks. That expression is extremely complex. For the first time since his rebirth, Ye Zhaoyan has carefully scrutinized this lady. She takes good care of herself, has a delicate skin tone, slightly curved eyes, and a very approachable smile. I am already in my 40s, yet I still have an outstanding demeanor, with every frown and smile showcasing my outstanding demeanor. But those phoenix eyes were deep and bright, exuding a shrewdness, as if they could discern anyone's secret. Her gaze towards Ye Zhaoyan was filled with pity. That kind of gaze, like looking at an injured child. However, such a gaze was not present in Ye Zhaoyan's memory. In her past life, Lady Qin had very little contact with her, let alone taking her to pray for blessings. Seeing Ye Zhaoyan looking over, Lady Qin smiled and said, "Zhaoyan, did you sleep well last night?" Ye Zhaoyan withdrew his thoughts and smiled calmly, saying, "Thank you very much for Mrs. Qin's concern. She slept very well last night." Her senses towards Lady Qin are not bad in her heart, even though she is Xue Huaidan's aunt. It's just necessary to be cautious, but we can't go without it. Upon hearing Ye Zhaoyan's words, Lady Qin smiled with relief and said, "The wind is strong today, be careful not to catch a cold. I have prepared a cloak for you." After speaking, he reached out and handed over a light red brocade cloak from the box of the carriage. Ye Zhaoyan took a glance at the cloak. The shawl is made of high-quality sheep fur, with warm and smooth tentacles that feel very warm to the touch. She was wearing a plain white gauze skirt, and the cape on her body could just cover her delicate curves. This kind of material may be valuable. Ye Zhaoyan calmly glanced at Lady Qin. She is very thoughtful. However, such eye-catching patterns made her feel strange. End of this chapter. Chapter 8. Blessing. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 8. Blessing. Madame Qin said with a smile, "The sunlight is very good today. If we add an extra cloak, it will be beautiful." She also wore a cloak herself, which was now stacked aside due to the warmth inside the car. A valuable snow fox thick cloak, looking low-key and warm. On the side, Xue Huaidan wore a long coat embroidered with lotus flowers in lake blue, which looked even more magnificent than Ye Zhaoyan. But if this brocade cloak is added, it will instantly become a supporting piece. She felt both jealousy and unwillingness in her heart. But it cannot show any trace. This beautiful object should have belonged to her. Although she is from the Xue family, she has been raised in the Ye family for several years. She is the most outstanding woman in the Ye family. Ye Zhaoyan is old-fashioned and cliché, and matching such luxurious and beautiful clothes with her is simply a waste of time. Madame Qin naturally noticed Xue Huaidan's gaze. She just doesn't have time to care about these things, the things in front of her are even more important. This cloak was specially made by me, it must look great on you. She stuffed the cloak into Ye Zhaoyan's arms and urged, "Give it a try." Ye Zhaoyan took the cloak and tried it on, but said, "This cloak is very good, but it's a bit small when worn. Maybe I've gained some weight in the past few months." Ye Zhaoyan rarely makes new clothes, and the cloak is made according to the size measured in spring. It has been 3 months since then. If it's too small, it makes sense. Mrs. Qin clearly looked very well fitted. A hint of panic flashed in her eyes, but in a blink of an eye, a hint of smile quickly reappeared. "You girl, when did you learn to be humble? Your mother even said how long you need to grow if you're too thin." Xue Huaidan, who was standing beside her, heard these words and inexplicably clenched her handkerchief tightly. With her pride, it was not appropriate to speak at this moment. What good things she has on weekdays are always rushed by others to beg her to accept. But the situation before us is special. After careful consideration, as the air was about to solidify, she slowly said, "Sister Zhaoyan, your body is thin. How about wearing my clothes?" Opening his package, he took out a lotus-colored outer garment and placed it next to Ye Zhaoyan. The style of the outer garment is elegant, embroidered with intricate patterns, and the cuffs are embroidered with light green bamboo knots. It looks very exquisite, but in terms of luxury, it is far from the clothes in Ye Zhaoyan's hand. Madame Qin hurriedly stopped and said, "Zhaoyan is going to the hidden temple for the first time. It's better to wear more expensive clothes." Xue Huaidan's face couldn't hold up as she was rebutted, and she reluctantly said, "I'm just afraid that Zhaoyan's sister will catch a cold." Speaking, the hand holding the outer shirt also felt uneasy for a few minutes. Ye Zhaoyan lowered his eyelids slightly, concealing the flickering light at the bottom of his eyes. She took Xue Huaidan's hand and took the initiative to say, "Thank you, sister. Please hold this light red brocade cloak for me, Sister Huaidan." Xue Huaidan's face turned clear, and she felt relieved in her heart. She almost couldn't come down just now. Who would have thought that Lady Qin, who always politely supported her, would fall off the chain at a crucial point? What a strange anomaly. She hesitated for a moment, pretending to be reserved, and finally took the cloak over. "Thank you, Sister Zhaoyan." "You're welcome." Ye Zhaoyan smiled at the corners of his lips, gentle and polite, and his tone was calm and indifferent, making it impossible for anyone to feel any disgust. Madame Qin couldn't help but sigh from the bottom of her heart when she saw this. After the carriage drove into the city gate, the journey was smooth and unobstructed. Soon, it drove into front of a large temple. At this moment, it is already afternoon, and the sunlight is gradually slanting westward. The temple is filled with people who are full of incense. There are stalls on both sides of the street, hawkers are selling incense sticks, tomatoes on sticks and other goods. Ye Zhaoyan did not expect that the hidden temple located in the corner would be so lively. The carriage stopped in front of the temple gate, and Ye Zhaoyan, Lady Qin, and Xue Huaidan got off the carriage. Xue Huaidan had a large number of people and horses, afraid of obstructing the passage of the people, so he stopped on the nearby mountainside to rest. Only 6 shrewd guards were dispatched to accompany the carriages and horses of 3 female dependents. The coachman unloaded the things from the car and respectfully asked Ye Zhaoyan, "Miss, please take a step first. We'll finish packing up and arrive later." Ye Zhaoyan expressed his gratitude and walked towards the temple. In front of the temple, there were dozens of monks wearing coarse linen clothes responsible for maintaining order. When they saw the 3 of them visiting, they immediately welcomed them. A group of people had already received the news and knew that the nobleman from Yi Mansion was coming, so they naturally understood the extraordinary identities of the 3 people in front of them. "But I don't know who the most esteemed Miss Yi from the Yi family is. The attire of the 3 people in front of me is exquisite, with only the light red brocade cloak being the most eye-catching." Several discerning monks gathered around Xue Huaidan's side, saddle in front of and behind his horse. This made her feel extremely proud and even more pretentious, with a reserved and refined demeanor. Ye Zhaoyan felt amused at the sight and left the bustling crowd to walk towards the side door. The side rooms of the hidden temple for benefactors to pray and practice meditation are often located next to the main hall. "Miss Zhaoyan has arrived. My Dharma name is Huiyuan. Please follow me to the backyard." An inconspicuous monk approached and smiled at Ye Zhaoyan, saying. His face was dark, and there was a hint of simplicity and honesty between his eyebrows. Ye Zhaoyan had never seen him, but the other party accurately recognized her. It's really rare. Thank you, master. She blessed Huiyuan and followed him into the temple. Xue Huaidan, who was not far away, saw the situation and followed closely behind, afraid of missing something. Mrs. Qin fell a few steps behind and quietly stopped outside the courtyard door. At the foot of the mountain, Xue Huaidan looked in the direction of the hidden temple, his eyes deep, as if quietly waiting for something. Like a dormant hunter, waiting for the trapped prey after the rainstorm. A elegantly dressed monk is rushing towards the temple on the mountain. He passed by the carriage and horse, and curiously glanced at Xue Huaidan. Why does the Fate Lord stop here? The Buddha is within reach, why not come forward and pay his respects? Xue Huaidan exuded dignity and value all over his body, and ordinary passers-by along the way never looked at him directly. This person has an ordinary appearance, yet he is fearless in the face of him, which is truly rare. Xue Huaidan reluctantly said, "There is a Buddha in my heart." What is the difference between worshipping and not worshipping? A person with a Buddhist heart is indeed not inferior to this tiny thread. The monk clasped his hands and said. He finally sighed when he saw a fierce black mist lingering between Xue Huaidan's eyebrows. Respect and fear are ultimately different. Xue Huaidan ignored the strange monk and turned his head to attract his confidant as he walked away. Has that person been sent over? It's already arranged, the brown-clad guard next to him replied with a lowered head. After Ye Zhaoyan recovered from his illness, Xue Huaidan's control over the Ye family began to imbalance. He had not experienced this elusive feeling for a long time. The last time it was given to him by his father. Law Yi Wenshuan. The period of going south is approaching, and if he cannot take away Ye's mother and daughter, his plan will be put on hold. Unfortunately, this seemingly obedient daughter did not meet his expectations. He doesn't mind giving her some leverage, so that he can firmly control this mother and daughter. On the other side, Ye Zhaoyan and his group followed Huiyuan to a very secluded courtyard behind the temple. This courtyard covers an area of about 100 acres and is surrounded by rows of trees. The trunks are tall and lush, giving it a lively appearance. Ye Zhaoyan secretly felt strange in his heart. Inside this bustling temple, there is such a large and quiet place. The hidden temple is actually built hidden among the trees, which is truly unique. Is this temple the residence of a noble person who worships Buddha? Ye Zhaoyan followed Huiyuan into the courtyard. Please enter and pray for blessings, Miss Zhaoyan, Huiyuan said to Ye Zhaoyan. Xue Huaidan was about to approach together, but was stopped. End of this chapter. Chapter 9. Picture scroll. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 9 Picture scroll. Miss, your room is on the side. Huiyuan pointed to a nearby corner. I saw a narrow wing room at the very edge, right next to a crooked-necked tree. That wing room is far less spacious and magnificent than the one in front of us. Xue Huaidan noticed something unusual, but it was difficult to say anything. This time I came to the hidden temple to pray for Ye Zhaoyan's blessings, she was just here to help. She hesitated and awkwardly said, I'm a bit scared alone. I'll wait outside for Zhaoyan's sister first. As soon as he entered the room, Ye Zhaoyan smelled a strong scent of sandalwood. This taste is somewhat familiar, as if it had appeared in her memory before. The simple and elegant decoration inside the house is a customary place for praying for blessings. Looking at the jade Buddha statue in front of him, Ye Zhaoyan's expression was somewhat dazed. She remembered being a prisoner, tormented and seriously ill, searching everywhere for a way out. In the corner of Ye Mansion, my mother also looked so devout. Worshipping in front of a rudimentary wooden statue of a bodhisattva. Ye Zhaoyan's eyes showed a look of pain, and she closed her eyes, trying to suppress her sadness. After a while, she knelt down again on the cattail and worshipped 3 times devoutly. I pray in my heart for all the worries. Live a lifetime, she must not let the Yi family repeat the same mistakes. She took a deep breath and slowly got up, only to suddenly see that there was a slight yellowing in the back of the Buddha statue. She reached out to touch, and a thin foreign object felt from her fingertips. There seems to be something else behind this. Ye Zhaoyan slowly walked over and found that this layer of yellow was originally a curtain, but due to its age, it was tightly attached to the painting. She reached out and peeled off the yellow cloth on the wall. It is an ancient and rustic painting. On the scroll, there is a young man brewing tea. The young man has a handsome face and an extraordinary demeanor, making him an outstanding figure at first glance. There was still a sword hanging behind him, with the blade unsheathed and the cold light piercing. The young man is brewing tea. Across from him sat a young and beautiful girl. The girl was drinking tea, her gaze fixed on the teacup in front of her. The two seemed to be talking about something interesting, and the girl had a shallow smile on her lips. The woman's profile is extremely perfect, as if sculpted. Ye Zhaoyan stared closely at the woman in the painting, as if she had been pinned down. How could there be such similar people in this world? The woman in this painting is almost the same as her. Her eyes trembled slightly, and a hint of doubt suddenly surged in her heart. Is that her? Why does she feel familiar with the painting in front of her? After carefully studying for a while, she realized that although the woman in this painting was very similar to her, her demeanor were more elegant and composed than hers. Her every move and gesture showed a sense of nobility, as if she were a noblewoman in heaven. Although the young man in the painting is similar in age to the person in the painting, his temperament gives people a feeling of standing out from the crowd. The young man's eyebrows and eyes revealed a hint of wisdom and composure, which was not the grandeur that ordinary teenagers could possess. This young man is rare among ordinary people. This cognition suddenly popped out of Ye Zhaoyan's mind. Her gaze slowly fell on the young man holding a white porcelain bowl in the painting, and a crystal-clear water droplet stopped at his fingertips, lifelike against the backdrop of the lantern. The silhouette of this person made her feel like she had met before. Just as she was puzzled, a strange noise came from within. Bang! Bang bang, accompanied by strange noises, a series of crisp porcelain cracking sounds. Upon hearing the sound, Ye Zhaoyan's heart twitched a few times and instinctively glanced towards the inner room. The candlestick in the inner room was burning, creating a dim atmosphere, but a slender man could be vaguely seen walking slowly towards it. A strange fragrance mixed with sandalwood drifted towards the tip of the nose. Ye Zhaoyan suddenly felt a drowsiness. This fragrance is strange. She looked up again and saw that the incense stick was burning vigorously. The freshly burned ash was more delicate than the fallen ashes. Obviously made of different materials. Surprisingly, it is a stick of fake sandalwood that has been grafted. Ye Zhaoyan suppressed his dizziness and brain swelling, and walked towards the door while observing the figure inside. The man has a slender figure, with an ordinary facial feature paired with a cloth jacket. His clothes were disheveled, his face was unusually rosy, and a pair of dark eyes stared straight at her, making people feel extremely uncomfortable. Ye Zhaoyan had a vague conjecture in his heart. She just couldn't believe that person would design her so boldly. Every step he took seemed to step on Ye Zhaoyan's heart. Ye Zhaoyan felt difficulty breathing, driving his internal energy to move outward. Just as she was about to lose her support, her hand finally slammed the door. Xue Huaidan outside the door was originally taken away, but seeing Lady Qin and the guards outside also evacuated, I couldn't help but feel suspicious. She anticipated that Ye Zhaoyan would avoid the crowd and engage in secretive activities, so she kept hiding in the corner observing the movements. At this moment, the door rang lightly, and she finally found the opportunity. She took a brisk step and burst open the door. Sister Zhaoyan. Ye Zhaoyan could only feel the wind blowing in her ears, and a flash of light in front of her had already been forcefully pushed aside. Her entire body collided with the table. Ah! At the moment of opening the door, Xue Huaidan stood stiffly at the door, afraid to take another step forward. She saw the man inside the room and instantly realized something. The man smiled and gently pulled open the collar on his chest. This action made Xue Huaidan feel heart pounding. Her head exploded with a loud bang, and her heart almost jumped out of her throat. I'm just passing by, such a scene, even a fool knows what will happen next. Xue Huaidan's face turned pale, and her eyes were full of fear. Where else is there a hint of usual aloofness? She can't stay here anymore, otherwise Ye Zhaoyan covered her painful arm, and at this moment, the door opened. She breathed smoothly and her mind became a bit clearer. If we can delay it a little longer, she looked up at Xue Huaidan, clearly not thinking of the same place as her. Xue Huaidan can still pay some respect to Ye Zhaoyan on weekdays, maintaining the etiquette on her face. Even though she was jealous of Ye Zhaoyan in her heart, she couldn't help but feel sincere about the glory of the other person and the benefits she could benefit from in the future. After today's incident, Ye Zhaoyan may only be assigned to carry her shoes. After hesitating for a moment, her inner darkness poured out in an instant. As the man approached, she said decisively, "She is Miss Yi of the Yi family, and I am just her maid. If you want to find her, find her." He pushed Ye Zhaoyan hard to block him and ran towards the door without hesitation. A sharp light flashed in Ye Zhaoyan's eyes, and his figure shook, firmly dragging Xue Huaidan's feet. "What are you doing?" Xue Huaidan exclaimed in panic, with the mask off her face and a merciless unfamiliar expression. She didn't expect Ye Zhaoyan's reaction to be so rapid. Seeing that Ye Zhaoyan didn't let go, she couldn't help but kick and step on the ground with force. Ye Zhaoyan suppressed the pain and pulled a mocking curve at the corner of his mouth. The young man only saw the light red woven cloak on Xue Huaidan's body at this moment. The lotus root pink outer garment on Ye Zhaoyan's body was just the clothing of ordinary wealthy families. By comparison, it is clear who the lady is. He squinted his eyes slightly, with a dangerous cold gleam in his eyes. I mistook the wrong person. End of this chapter. Chapter 10. Traps. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 10. Traps. The young man's lips slightly curled up and he stared at Xue Huaidan with a smile on his face, asking, "Little sister, are you here to find me?" Xue Huaidan's face suddenly changed when she heard the man's words. Ye Zhaoyan's heart was clear, and he pretended to stumble out of the door, using all his strength to close it. Xue Huaidan heard the sound of the door closing and was so scared that her legs were weak and trembling. She collapsed to the ground, her hands and feet covered in cold sweat. "How much silver do you want?" "I'll give it to you. As long as you let me go," Xue Huaidan said urgently, rarely freeing a trace of calmness. Where can a beautiful woman be useful with silver? The man in green remained unmoved. Letting her go is unlikely to expose the situation. What if she bites back? If he is poked out, that adult cannot protect him either. He remembered the principle that even with money, one should keep one's life and enjoy it. Upon hearing these words, Xue Huaidan seemed to have fallen into a vast abyss. When the man's hand touched her face, she jumped up like she had just woken up from a dream. This man is probably really blind to money. "I'm willing to help you. I'll help you get Miss Yi from the Yi mansion," Xue Huaidan said without hesitation. At this point, she could no longer maintain the dignity of Miss Gue, and her confidence in speaking had disappeared. The man refused to talk nonsense to her and reached out to grab her. Xue Huaidan turned around to escape, but panicked and stumbled on the ground, hitting her forehead hard on the floor. Blood droplets emerged and flowed down her cheeks. The young man frowned and reached out to pull Xue Huaidan back. He pressed her against the door and pulled off her waist belt. Xue Huaidan struggled desperately, but unfortunately her resistance had little effect. The man's other hand grabbed her hair. Her hair tightened, and there was intense pain on her scalp, which made her teary eyes blur. The Venus in front of her was spinning wildly, and she could hardly open her eyes. Xue Huaidan desperately pounded the man's chest, trying to escape the shackles, but the man's arms tightly restrained her like iron. "Let go of me! Help!" Xue Huaidan cried out, hoarsely shouting. "Pada pada!" He tugged at Xue Huaidan's hair with one hand and her waist belt with the other, constantly pulling and tugging. He unbuttoned his pants, revealing the snow-white obscene pants inside. Xue Huaidan trembled with fear when she saw the obscene pants. "Don't touch me! Don't touch me! Get out of here! Don't!" She cried and struggled. The man heard her pitiful plea for mercy and felt a surge of pleasure in his heart. He threw his pants aside and forcefully tore at Xue Huaidan's skirt. In the courtyard, as Ye Zhaoyan fled, the cries for help in his ears grew farther and farther away. Outside, it was empty and Lady Qin had long disappeared. Before entering, she clearly saw several people guarding outside the courtyard. The eerie silence revealed an unusual aura. Ye Zhaoyan hesitated and couldn't help but stop. Xue Huaidan did not allow anyone to take care of her maid and mother-in-law, so she arranged for 2 shadow guards. Make an appointment with a secret whistle and be able to protect her thoroughly at critical moments. As she walked out of the corridor, just as she was about to play the secret code, a mournful call came from the direction of the wing room. The sound of footsteps echoed in the opposite direction of the courtyard. "Someone is coming from outside. Mississippi." A beautifully dressed maid gasped for breath and looked at Ye Zhaoyan with some surprise. Surprisingly, it was Lian Shuang. Behind her were 4 capable guards. Clothing and accessories are exclusive to the Yi family, but their appearance is unfamiliar to the eye. Ye Zhaoyan had a clear idea in his heart and pressed his skeptical expression, saying naturally, "I'm fine." Upon hearing this, Lian Shuang did not smile, but instead showed a hint of panic. At this moment, Ye Zhaoyan's clothes were gray and there was a red and swollen face, which described him as somewhat disheveled. It is obvious that something has been experienced. Just her dress is intact, her expression is very calm, not like what Lian Shuang was told before. Lian Shuang suddenly heard a woman's shout clearly. Just as she was puzzled, Ye Zhaoyan pointed to the side room in the courtyard and said, "I just seem to hear Sister Jian calling." The 3 guards rushed in immediately upon hearing the words. Only a burly black-clad guard stopped and stood still with Lian Shuang. Lian Shuang was sweating profusely, and she thought of a terrifying situation. If that matter is encountered by Miss Jian, how should she handle it? Ye Zhaoyan felt a chill as he watched Lian Shuang's increasingly ugly face. She is not bad at the 4 maids, not only treating them well in terms of expenses, but also being tolerant in daily life. The servants in her yard can be said to be the most comfortable in the Yi family. Lian Shuang, who had been with her for 4 years, easily came to plan against her for someone of a different surname. Lian Shuang remembered the incident mentioned by the adult and hurriedly said, "Miss, follow me. Follow me." She couldn't think of any good reason for a moment. "Miss is injured, let's go to the meditation room to find a monk doctor." The black-clad guard beside him had a deep expression on his face and a tone with a hint of toughness. Ye Zhaoyan stared at his hand tightly gripping the handle of the knife, silent. She knew that if he didn't agree, he would definitely forcibly take her away. "Miss, please," the black-clad guard urged again. Ye Zhaoyan gritted his teeth and said, "My injury is fine. I'll go and greet my father first." At this moment, there were only a few guards outside the temple, and her shadow guards were only 2 people. Faced with numerous enemies, she couldn't take advantage. Pretending to leave the temple and then waiting for an opportunity to escape is currently the best option. Before she could finish speaking, the black-clad guard's figure flashed in front of her, staring at her with a cold gaze as if he had seen through her excuses. Upon seeing this, Ye Zhaoyan's eyes slightly froze. The black-clad guards exuded a strong murderous aura, indicating that they were seasoned veterans of the battlefield. Ye Zhaoyan dodged backwards, and the guard drew a sword to bully him forward. "I offended you." He swung his knife sharply and stabbed Ye Zhaoyan. Ye Zhaoyan narrowly avoided danger, and a large piece of her plain white lower skirt was cut. As she turned around for a moment, her waist was cut apart by the opponent's knife, and the hem of her skirt spread apart. These moves are not fierce, it seems that they are not meant to harm her. Who are you from? Ye Zhaoyan asked coldly. The other party did not answer her, but instead put away the knife and retreated to the side. At this moment, although Ye Zhaoyan was not injured, his clothes were ragged and in a state of embarrassment. A look of being insulted. She suddenly realized something was wrong. Ye Zhaoyan silently retreated backwards. The guard looked up vigilantly and saw that the person had retreated to the wall. He shouted loudly and chased after him with a knife. He acted quickly and ruthlessly, and although Ye Zhaoyan dodged, he also felt uncomfortable. Ye Zhaoyan was hiding while trying to escape. A cold light flickered in her eyes, and she suddenly lifted her palm and patted him. The man in black indeed wielded his sword and attacked each other. The sharp blade brushed against the girl's arm and cut through her sleeve. Ye Zhaoyan let out a painful cry. The black-clothed guard's sword struck fiercely. Ye Zhaoyan's sleeve fluttered, revealing a bright color. The black-clad guard felt a daze in front of him. A silver short dagger flew towards him at an extremely sharp angle. He was caught off guard and was shot in the left arm, causing his body to stumble and fall to the ground. The knife in hand fell to the ground. Ye Zhaoyan turned around and ran towards the wall. "Stop her, don't let her leave." A cold voice sounded from behind. End of this chapter.